Окей. Леди и джентльмены, я рад приветствовать вас в этом гостеприимном городе, в этом прекрасном зале. И я хочу пригласить на сцену участников.
I would now like to welcome Mr. Misharin, the Vice Representative and Director of High-Speed Trains in Russia, Thomas Kargl, Rail Cargo Austria, then the Alexander Grom, President Alexander Misharin, the President of FESCO, Fedor Pekhterev, the advisor to the first Deputy CEO of RCB, Amoros, the President of FERRME, and Libor Lochman, the Executive Director of the CER, as well as Simon Fletcher, the Coordinator of the Europe UIC. Will Looking at the name of the next session, we're now going to see the first transparency. Ladies and gentlemen, our topic today is the international cooperation, standardization, and the abolition of borders. This, of course, is a very difficult challenge. As the Chinese colleague yesterday said, if you want to get rich, you need to build roads. I do believe that we all agree that we have all met here in order to make money. And we have all, of course, also focused on railways. So we here represent, I believe, the largest part of the world's railway transport, covering about half the world's population. Today, we have some data on the joint commerce between the East and the West, two major continents, the EU, two major economic areas, the EU and the People's Republic of China, one of the leading economies in the world. Let us consider that here we're seeing a long-term trend, an increase in sales of goods in the years to come, and this will also continue, an increase in the imports into the EU, People's Republic of China. Everything is growing, 35% in growth in terms of the sales from China into the EU. Now, the share of rail transport is not that significant when we look at these figures only, but when we look at the trade from China into the EU and EU into China, here this is very important. We have cars, we have optical products, we have garments, etc. And here we do have a very vivid exchange in both directions. Of course, there's some sectors that can better use sea transport, but other goods could, for instance, be considered that require about the same volumes of transport from China into the EU and the other way around. Commerce, of course, is a major driver of development, and here we are in the Eurasian zone, Europe and Asia. When the conference opened yesterday, everyone said that there is no competition, that everyone is working into one direction so that we'll all be successful. We must all then contribute. Mr. Misharin will be the first speaker. He comes from the railways. He started off as an engineer in Sverdlovsk, then worked for the Ministry of Transport. Then he was governor, one of the strongest industrialized regions in Russia. And now, at present, he is the Deputy Director General of RZD, the Russian State Railways. Alexander Sergeyevich, we are here talking about a major railway network between Europe and Asia. First, would you say that this is one single unified network, given the fact that it covers lots of countries? And how can we then make the transport of goods more efficient? I would like to thank you for this opportunity to participate and welcome you all. As you can see, each year the Congress is attracting more and more participants. I would like to thank the organizers, including for the reception we had last night at the Hofburg, and which was co-organized by us. Each year, we're seeing a positive development, an increase in rail cargo. 5 years ago, these were 50 or 40,000 containers per year. Last year, the figure had gone up dramatically. And by 2019, we already have 670,000 containers. I think that 700,000 are within reach. Every unit, every session of our conference presented successful examples, but I think that we should also speak about the problems. We should think about how we can improve the tonnage and all the participants in this process. This requires certain steps. On this transparency, you can see the successes of the previous year. And when we look at transit from China to Europe via Russia and Kazakhstan, we're having different routes, and these routes develop in different ways. The one route via Kargl, via Mongolia, via Kazakhstan, and the seaports in the Far East. Here we do have fluctuations which depend on the situation in China, the efficacy and efficiency at border crossings. Then also, here we can see, for instance, an increase by 5 times from one year to the next, and the year after that it is suddenly 0 because the border crossing was suddenly closed down. So how do these technologies work? The most important factors that we've mentioned is the legal situation. Here we must manage to get this single form. Especially in Asia, one single language should be used. And this is something that we need to do in the near future. Next transparency, please. We often talk about tonnage, how specific or how many border crossings do we have specifically. So railway stations for Asia and Europe, and also for Asia in Europe. This is interesting. We do have about an equal number of stations getting goods to China, as well as stations in China getting goods to Europe. It is quite astonishing that the number of these exit stations is the same. It is no longer port to port or door to door, port of destination to port of destination, ex-works to client. We now also have rail cargo. About 600,000 rail kilometers is the distance between Asia and Europe that is covered by rail and is hardly ever mentioned. Technically speaking, of course, we are seeing huge differences. It is not just about the gauge, 2025 versus 2034 millimeters. We also have 1,670 kilometers of railway lines in India and Pakistan, which are not connected to the general network at all, neither technologically nor in terms of logistics. So here, a lot of work needs to be done in the future. Now, next transparency. What we're doing here, of course, we need to get rid of all the barriers at every border crossing point and the crossing points of the main routes. Here we can see the results. In the Kaliningrad, Poland area, results are great. And just as we're having here the triangle of Poland, Kaliningrad, Belarus, where we work on 3 corners, we will also have the same in other areas. There won't be any questions about that. So my consequence from all of this is that the project of the broad gauge rail, Košice, Bratislava, Vienna, is just as important, opening up a new window into Europe. And several windows and doors between Europe and Asia opened up, just as is the case between China and Russia already. Another interesting example for TEU containers between Korea and Japan is the following. 3,500 containers are currently shipped on the Korean peninsula. That is very, very little. Once we've got all the technological solutions in place, that number could be increased to 500,000. 3,500 almost is unrealistic. It's fictitious almost. I once said to a colleague, you won't manage 500,000. But if we look again at Kaliningrad, Belarus, and that this is running very smoothly, you can say that same can happen in other regions as well. To close with, we often talk about rail speed, 1,000 kilometers, 1,500 kilometers. Now, next transparency, please. Railway, of course, has a huge potential, 5,000 kilometers. When we look at the map, we can have high-speed rail systems from China and Europe that can be connected, and cargo transport can then be cut to 2 or 3 days between Asia and Europe. That, of course, is a completely different type of logistics, a completely different type of vision, but still it is possible. It is not science fiction. It is something that is quite tangible. Right now, the Russian high-speed rail system is not yet in place, but next time we will be able to talk about success in this area. Thank you very much. Now, next speaker, very interesting. He is a graduate from the Moscow Railway Institute. He's an engineer, and after that, he also did a master in business studies and also worked in Russia's #1 logistics and transport company. He was the first vice president of FESCO. Mikhail Alexandrovich Grom is sitting next to me. Since 2016, he has been with UTK. It's not a mere chance, I believe, because during that time, the company has produced great figures, both in terms of kilometers and tonnage, working between Kazakhstan and China, Kaliningrad, Belarus. And I know that he's also studying Chinese, which, of course, is very important. It is much better, of course, to start in childhood, but still, he's doing well, and he also has a good idea. I would like to say that for the first time in public. He's saying that in Europe and Asia we are having such long railway lines. Maybe we could then also call this the big railway network, but in Chinese. So thank you very much. Thank you. Can't even remember. Maybe I have said so, but not because we're so great. I was using Chinese. I was saying that the tasks were major for the countries that were involved in this transit. Of course, for every country, the development of technologies, infrastructure, transport, ecology are key tasks. And these tasks are then converging in railways, in the railway industry. So maybe we could also set ourselves a great objective, and that would be to create a Eurasian railway network. Alexey Yurievich, it is easy for him to sit here with us because he's really spoken about everything that is important. But maybe we could just mention a couple of aspects that still have not been sufficiently considered. I would like to congratulate us all on having this Congress here, this Railway Summit, because of course we need to sign documents, memorandums. We need to meet new people, new colleagues, and it's so great to meet. And then also maybe about our joint goals and objectives, something I really rejoice in doing. And I would like to congratulate everyone else who finds it just as much fun as I do. What is even more important is that the more often we meet and the more we create results, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million containers, the better they are paid for, the higher the potential we can finally then reach operatively and also in terms of finance. And the quicker we will open up new business opportunities between Europe and Asia. We have already said a lot and heard a lot about Mongolia and the Far East. These transit routes. But let me maybe show you yet another transparency about the world's two largest economic blocks and about transit, how transit is developing here. We're here seeing a 3% increase in transport volumes in general, but for containers It was 23% in 2017, 2018, 24% in increase. And colleagues yesterday told me that a couple of years ago, no one ever thought that it would be possible to ship 1 million EU containers between Asia and Europe. But today, this is a reality. Regardless of the fact that the figures might not look that great, we believe that it is still a great achievement of recent years that we have managed to increase the number of partners in our virtual millionaires club. Here, of course, we have signed new agreements with new partners, and together we will explore new routes, a new quality for our service on these new railway lines. As we've said in the beginning last year, we experienced major growth in trading goods between Europe and China. As the previous speaker said, on the TLK route, we managed to double tons. And in 2019, we will focus on maximizing our marketing efforts and technological efforts to suit the EU area. We have even come up with a formula, with a slogan for 2019. Utility area for the EU. So, what do we propose? So, what do we really want to suggest to the EU market? First, come up with better prices for our services, and I would like to use this forum in order to suggest and offer better tariffs and rates for EU companies as well as Asian companies. So everyone enjoying and using the benefits of rail transport, I would like to offer them better rates. We also want to offer special rates for our EU partners for individual projects. For instance, 2 German companies have contacted us. I don't want to advertise anything here, but these are 2 very solid German companies, and they suggested 2 rail projects in connection with the Baltic maritime ports around Kaliningrad. We are here having very favorable rates for intermodal. Our rate policy, or TLK, is public. There is no secret information on that, which is why these rates will soon be known to everyone. Our EU logistics partner will soon realize these sales on the new broad gauge railway, and we can then also double our potential via Prusky, Brest-Litovsk, Kaliningrad, Prusy. So this is where we're going to have intermodal border crossing points, and a lot is happening there. We also keep hearing from our Chinese partners that China is seeing an increasing demand. We have heard quite a lot about speed, 1,500 kilometers a day, which means that we're in the reach of a 5-day transport between China and the EU on the 1520 railway. Now, my question to the EU partners is, don't you want to get 24-hour deliveries into every EU country, any place in the Union? That might be a great new project for the European Union. Now, to close with, let me just add that rail cargo already is a prime topic very high up on the agenda of the world's leading consulting companies. During, for instance, has published a major report on the EU-China trade. And this is also remarkable. For us, this might be proof of our excellent results. On our website, we have a railway index 2015.com. And the consulting agency is publishing our index on its own website, which is why I'm so happy that our work has generally been recognized. Yesterday, we concluded new agreements with new customers. And when I then spoke about my index, the question suddenly came up, very surprisingly, but still, I quite like the question. And thank you very much that we have such an index, that we have such information in such a transparent manner, which you can put on the website. And the customer then knows whether rail cargo or maritime cargo will be better. We are very happy to also have a share in the market. They then asked me who is the most favorable along this delivery chain. The answer, of course, is that there is no partner that would be less important, but the entire network functions if all the members of the chain work greatly. Alexander Nikolaevich Sergeyevich, you suggested the idea that the chances offered by railways must be used to maximum in order to achieve a major goods throughput at the EU's external borders. In accordance with the AGD's initiative, last year we organized the Eurasian Transport Forum, about which there are reports. We could see that here we're having a huge unused potential for rail cargo. Let me also then thank the Czech Director General of Railways into the East. New corridors have been opened up in Russia and Europe, or at least prepared. So what alternatives are there? What new high-performing routes dedicated to turnover? This is a bit unexpected for me, and I welcome you, dear colleagues. Of course, it's a great chance for me to speak to you. Yes, there are alternatives. We know exactly that Brest is overburdened as a junction, and we know that the Belarus railways are very actively searching for new border crossing points. Anyway, when we look at the flow of goods towards Germany, we come to a halt at Frankfurt on the Oder, which is also overburdened as a border crossing point, which is why I would now like to seize the opportunity by saying here that transit chances in the Czech Republic are undervalued. We don't have a map here where I could show you that, but when we then activate the map in our heads and we go south and look at the triangle, where we do have open border crossing points, Poland, Czech Republic, Germany, we can at least then take over part of these throughputs, helping our partners, Germany, Poland, Germany, Czech Republic, and thus cut transit times. So the Czech lines are less used. Is that correct? Well, it is difficult to say so, but yes, we do have possibilities. We do have all the infrastructure, and as was said quite correctly, Europe is not yet ready for such volumes, but believe me, all leading railways in Europe keep meeting and corresponding at regular intervals, solving some of the questions in this direction. For instance, feeder trains with 3 systems. What still needs to be done is train the mechanics accordingly. They also need to speak all these languages. Well, we see people passing through many thousand kilometers, but of course in Europe things are different, and the questions to be solved are different, but still we're heading towards a uniform system. And the local particularities is something we simply need to overcome, because we do have a common goal, something we can only solve with joint efforts. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this improvised statement. Now I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Lochman. He is the Executive Director of CER, and there are no such things as chances. He was trained at Schilling in Czech Republic. He has also got a FED in electronics. In Czech Republic, you also were a scientific manager in Prague, and you have been in this position since 2007 and have been promoted to executive director. The topic still is the same. What about the opportunities in Europe, the 28 countries in Europe? How can we take on this challenge in terms of goods and passenger transport coming in from the east? How can we solve these questions on European level, including the formalities and electronic documents required, to which we must now switch over so that this transport also is running smoothly?
If you allow me, that I will really try to connect the title of this session, which is how the standardization can help the railway, with the expectation of how to boost the rail freight flows between Europe and Asia. First, maybe if I can have the remote controller, so it will be easier for me to operate it. Thank you. So, few words about who we are. So the CR stands for the Community of European Railway Infrastructure Companies. We represent the interests of our members that are coming mostly from the territory of the European Union, but also from the candidate and associate states vis-à-vis the European Union policy makers, so namely the European Commission, the Parliament and the Council, in the process of setting the regulation. And now we are hitting the point. So all the debate that we have in Brussels, and also with regards to how to boost the railway, aims at setting the conditions right for having the railway more competitive. Why we do so? We do so because we need to find a way how the railway is really the solution for the better mobility, for the mobility that is sustainable, the mobility that will serve the society, so the mobility that will really take a minimum energy for the highest possible performance. And the railway is the tool, clearly. So how we want to achieve that? We want to achieve that through the approach which would be giving the right regulatory framework for making the rail the core or the backbone of the mobility chain. which would then result into what you expect, and the session that so far has been discussing, also intensifying boosting the cargo flows within the Europe, but also with the neighbors, and especially with Russia and the Chinese territory. So how we can make it more attractive for the customers. And now we are coming to the link with the title of the session, the standard, or I would approach it from the perspective of the harmonization. What we need to achieve is really what is called here the single European railway area. I must admit that we talk 1435 area mostly, although we have the members also in the 1520, the Baltic space. We also have, as I said, the candidate states like the Ukraine, Moldova, or Georgia, where we have 1520 networks. But mostly it's about how we do integrate, how we do harmonize the rail system within the EU territory, providing the higher quality for the customers, offering the level playing field for all the market actors, and especially being the more cost efficient, because this is what we are lacking so far, and this is what, by the way, I've also heard previously from discussions about the tariffs, about the prices that are then making the market accessible. So what we wish to achieve is precisely what you see now on the slide. So moving from the patchwork on the networks that are ruled mostly by the national rules to something which would really present to us the integrated and harmonized network of the European Union rail system, including, by the way, this famous issue of the languages that you need to talk. Because seriously, there is a huge obstacle at each of the borders, and I fully agree. When you wish to cross the border, you have to be fully compliant with all the language requirements of the neighbor. The way how to overcome it, you can use the innovative tools for having the automatic interpretation, or you have also an opportunity to migrate step by step to one single language, like we have it in the aviation, English. So that's are the opportunities that we have. But as I said, not limited to that. In any case, what is the challenge and also opportunity for the business in the future is to really harmonize the European railway system. Now, the fourth railway package, what is it? Who does know the European railway regulatory framework knows that we have been passing through the various railway packages aiming at opening the market, boosting the efficiency, so aiming at having the system more attractive for any newcomer, for any investor, for any company that would wish to operate the railway and the trains on the European tracks, in order to have, again, the pressure for the system efficiency and having the system more attractive for the customers. Here are a few points that I'm not going to read all of them, that should bring us with the help of the final package, and we really see that the fourth one is the final one, opening the remaining services on the passenger side, whilst the freight has been already opened with the first and the second package. So that having the opportunity of combining the market and the technical forces for the harmonization, and having the strong regulators and having a strong European Union Agency for Railways. This is the key that we are now going to work with, and the European Union Agency for Railways, by the way, is going to be given the executive powers as of June this year for all the issues related to the safety certificates and the vehicle authorization. So it's a lot of the changes that the European Union Railways will have to adopt, will have to absorb, and should help us, as I said, through the harmonization to bring us to the higher efficiency. On the both, as you can see, those two circles, the technical side as well as the market side, because they are integrated, they are combined, they need to be really well established in order really to produce what we need, which is the integration across the border and a better environment for all the investors. I would not necessarily call only private investors, but for all the investors on the railway side, of which one of the parameters is a clear standardization, which I'm sure that Simon will talk a little bit more about a bit later. And it will bring us to, and I will repeat it, to higher system efficiency and more attractiveness for the customers. The technical piece of that jigsaw is absolutely crucial, and that's why I already mentioned the agency already, because we absolutely need to have the technical harmonization. We need to have massive reduction of the national rules, not only on the paper, because there is certainly a perception, okay, you delete some rules from the paper and they disappear. No, we know that it's not true. Safety framework and operational framework, it's been built historically, and to overcome it, we will need to migrate it technically, so how to harmonize the infrastructure. We have to migrate the safety framework and the operational framework. So it's a run on a relatively long distance, but we have to achieve that. Otherwise, again, we will not be able to compete vis-à-vis the other sectors, and especially on the long distances, it will be road and the maritime. So the long-term goal, it's quite clear. Again, technically, single European railway area. I explained that the CR is here for helping, or I would say lobbying on behalf of our members, the businesses towards the policymakers. So we will try to achieve as best as possible the regulatory framework that will help the railways. On the other side, the railways have to help themselves as well. So what we need to achieve in order to boost the competitiveness vis-à-vis the other mobility actors. Further digitalization, so further, if more efficient services, more personalized service, or I would call it in the context of the cargo, you don't talk to the cargo, but you have to talk to the shippers. So we have to have the services that are more shippers friendly. We have to also push more for the driver, which is essential, the sustainability. So running more and more the traction on electric energy and running it in the way that we will use the renewables for the energy supplies. Because this is what should pay then in the future as well. Then we will be looking for the sustainable financing models. That was also I've heard here. How do we attract also the investors, not only on the train side, but also on the side of the infrastructure, because we will need to build a lot of new terminals. We need to have more capacity. We need to have a capacity also to accommodate the needs of both the passenger and the freight services, because especially in the Central European rail area, the railway is simply much more passenger-oriented than the freight. And when we talk about the bottlenecks, it's mainly the point where the freight is suffering from not having enough capacity. And finally, which is of course kind of result of what was been said before, embracing the new market opportunities, which brings me again back to what we've been discussing, the Eurasian market. So is there anything missing? As I said, that we will take care of the regulatory framework. On top of that, on top of the rail internal initiatives, what we need to fix is the issue related to the level playing field. I must always remind everyone of you in the room, because you will have to help us lobbying your governments, your states, your institutions, your members of your national parliaments. We need to change the perception that the rail can somehow I would say internally live from the profits generated from the businesses, while it's not needed any support of the infrastructure, that there is no need for the internalization of the external costs, and both of those factors are simply false. We have to make clear that the infrastructure is an asset that needs to be financed by the states, by the authorities, that should enable all the market actors to compete on a level playing field, and then also the society should be I would say, or the society, I would say differently, that the society should not be the party paying for all the externalities caused by the transportation. And here we have, of course, the huge disproportion of how the externalities are treated on the rail services, on the side of the rail services, on the side of the road. So there is a lot of what we can do, but a lot of what the governments can only help us if they are rightly lobbied. So please try to help all of you to what we need to achieve. Finally, if we have all in place, so we will have the nice harmonization of the circuit here, using the infrastructure financing, having the intermodal regulatory level playing field, and having the innovation and intermodal integration, then we will be more competitive, and then we will achieve what is, I believe, really the target of this session. How can the harmonization boost the volumes? How can we be better providing the services for the final customer? How can we be more attractive for the customers? And finally, how we help the society. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое. Libor, вы рассказали об очень многом интересном, что происходит.
Thank you very much. I think you've mentioned many points of many events that are happening in Europe. Now, do you think, could we increase the velocity to 1,000 kilometers per day?
Again, something which can come with the new wave of the innovation and complementing the current conventional railway. So yes, why not? Yeah.
Спасибо большое. Я думаю, что, так сказать, как бы суда и автомобили начнут отбирать часть потока, которую могли бы мы вести по железу.
Thank you. I think otherwise we'd use goods volumes, freight volumes to other forms of transport because we won't be able to keep up step with them. Now, brings me to our next speaker. He is the director of FESCO, a private enterprise in Russia. And FESCO combines several forms of transport, actually all of them. And the enterprise not only works with ports in Russia, but also China, and is looking at all ways of intermodal transport, is also looking at best practices in South Korea and Japan. Alexander is an interesting man because he was a representative of the Latvian railways. And the lady from the Latvian railways has, I think, left the room. But anyway, he started out then he went to Moscow. Then he went to Denmark to continue his studies. Then in Sweden, he graduated in Sweden. And so he's got a very interesting mixed career. Alexander, you started in your current position 2 years ago, in 2016. One question in this context. So, please don't forget to mention South Korea and Japan. Thank you. Thank you very much for the possibility for speaking here. Thank you very much for the excellent organization of this conference. And thank you very much for yesterday's reception, which was indescribable. It was very, very high standard and a difficult act to follow. We'll expect at least the same standard next year. I know that you're a lover of soccer, aren't you? And when you say UEV, UE, FESCO, and UE as partners, well, let me structure my presentation to 3 parts. I would like to say, since you asked me a few words about Korea and Japan, but we are active in this area, not only FESCO, but the Russian industry in general. Passenger volume and freight volume across Russia, as we heard, are increasing is everywhere. But we're aiming at the 4-fold volume for containers TEU over the next 5 years. This is what the federal policy program of Russia says, in fact. 550,000 containers, TEUs, are already on the table, and we want to increase it, if possible, 4-fold. Well, Europe and China, well, we have very ambitious plans. We have already been successful to a degree, yes, but we'd have to look at other options as well, because the trains going west are subsidized by China. We should not forget this. Infrastructure on the Chinese side is limited. Sometimes border crossings are closed. The logistics from the state side logistics tend also to favor ports. Let's forget Japan, of course, is an island, a number of islands, and Korea is a peninsula. So these countries, of course, will always depend very strongly on sea transport. These countries have a market share for 5%, 500,000 units should not be underestimated, and an important contribution towards the overall goal. And of course, we need these freights. Now, what do we do in order to reach this goal? In this, of course, speed is essential. It's the key advantage of the Trans-Siberian intermodal routes. And it's faster, of course, than sea transport, and therefore it is worthwhile to dispatch goods via land. Speed means money. This is certainly true. Now, we have established a network of services. It's called FESCO Fast Forward. And we extended last year to Korea and Japan, from Moscow to Japan and Korea. And it's really a fast route. And it says the same in all the languages as fast forward. The market has accepted this product. We've developed it together with Russian railways. My colleague has just told me it's called Haimichi in Japanese and Jirongi, I think, in Korean. Anyway, it means fast forward in all languages. Well, what is key for us is very lean management, because this makes certain rules faster. If you lengthen a sea transport and eliminate one port, of course, you will be able to increase speed. Then, of course, it's important to accelerate processes on site in the ports, increase the speed of transshipments. And because we're really following protocols down to individual minutes. And of course, an important task is to streamline documentation, because Koreans and Japanese are not so interested in what Russian customs want. Digitalization is also a very important step towards greater efficiency. And intermodality will only be possible through digitalization. Of course, we're conducting corresponding projects together with Russian railways, such as the electronic train from Japan to Europe. It's a paperless system, and we are close to implementing it. We have electronic platforms in the port of Vladivostok, and this increases the predictability and controllability of goods transport. This acceleration has already been increased by a factor of 2.5. And this is certainly a field where we can grow. Speed. This is one great advantage that we have on our side. The transit time, too, from the Far East to Western Europe is to be reduced, within Russia, of course, is to be reduced to 7 days. I think it's been mentioned yesterday. This can be achieved through the optimized cooperation between railways and ports. And for this, we need coordination both on the western and the western side, Vladivostok and Kaliningrad. And again, the more paperless, so to speak, we become, the better. And transshipment stations in Vladivostok and further towards west. Another important point is to avoid bottlenecks with corresponding programs for that. And the terminals must be, of course, located close to the western border of Russia. sometimes we lose 2 or 3 days at the borders, and this is something that has to be whittled down. Now, transport cost. On the one hand, we are faster. This is true. We've become faster, but we've become more expensive than, for example, transports via Suez Canal. It's about $2,000. It depends on direction. As I've said, Chinese government subsidizes railways. However, we do think that Russian enterprises can generate new profits from this. For example, Russian railways or the operators of other railway operators. So there is certainly space for subsidies from the Russian Federation in order to increase transit volumes. There are different models for this. For example, $500 per TEU. A subsidy of $500 per TEU would already be a great aid. This is an idea that is being seriously discussed, and I think we may expect a solution by next year in 2019. Thank you very much for your attention.
Там значится 9 минут 18 секунд. Очевидно, это лимит на выступление одного спикера, хотя мне подсказывают, что это лимит для завершения.
The organizers have told us that we cannot, unfortunately, continue for a very long time. But as you know, railways sometimes leave with a delay and may arrive with a slight delay as well. So perhaps we can catch up a little bit. But anyway, so as the machinist, so to speak, I would like to ask you to keep to the time table in order to help us to find a constructive solution. Now, our next speaker is Mr. Thomas Kargl, member of the board of the Rail Cargo Group Austria. Rail Cargo Group Austria is a big Austrian enterprise that this year has transported 20,000 TEUs. And they want to increase the volume. ÖBB is, I think, looking for partners in this. Thank you.
All right. So welcome also from my side. I promise I will keep the time. Yeah. Sorry at the beginning to correct. So it's about 1.4 million TEU in total, and we're just active in the transit. So the previous speakers brought a lot of facts on the table, so I don't need to repeat. So I think it's on me to give a short summary and dive into the history. So looking back in 2007, the first train between China and Europe started. Funny enough, from Dalian to Austria. Thanks to RGD with Transcontainer and a small private company, this train arrived with fire-resistant brakes in 16 days. Due to the fact that nobody could believe that this train is really going to Europe. Second train was then 35, 40 days. Financial crisis followed, then let's call the one or the other year of investment. And from 2009 on, it came up again to regular service until we reached the level in 2017 of more than 400,000 TEU, 2018, more than 500,000 TEU, and still growing by 25%, as we heard from Mr. Misharin. What has happened? On one side, all the organization learned that Chinese have a plan. Definitely, they started to create a plan for the next years. Takes a lot of money for investment. The whole corridor on the wide gauge territory improved the service. And meanwhile, when we're going from central China with the train towards Europe, it takes us around 6 days to be on the European entry border. And if I look at the transit time, we have 14 to 16 days. This means, and I mean it as I say, we are losing the time on this small lake in Europe. And this brings me to the challenges. What are the challenges to achieve a transit time which makes us able to survive with this service after subsidy of China, as mentioned before. So the transit time should be around 10 days and less, 8, 9 days. And these challenges are on the infrastructure side, definitely, where we have the border crossings. Looking at the map here, we are 5 border crossings on the Asian side, short sea directly into Vostochny, Nakhodka area. Then we have, in the north of China, we have Sabaikars, Manjuli. Then, of course, the Mongolian transit with Noshki Elian. And then we have the 2 border crossings in Kazakhstan with Khorgos, a modern terminal, as well as Dostik, where we are going into the Kazakh territory. Now, the last years, we were entering 99% of the volume in Brest-Małaszewice, the border crossing between Belarus and Poland, and this is totally overloaded. Many people mentioned it, I'm sure yesterday as well, so we're looking for alternatives. One alternative is definitely another border crossing. Here we can mention Kaliningrad, but all the others as well. But this is facing the challenge that we need investments in the infrastructure. The infrastructure investments start. It takes a time until it's done. What can we do in between? In between, there is this word the last years and will last for the next years. It's digitalization. Now, there are a lot of ongoings and projects between China and Russia. They're more or less ready. Yeah? So we have a smooth documentation from the shipper to the different customs station. And if I'm talking to all these customs authorities in Europe, they're also ready. The only thing what is missing is that we have to take them on hand, bring them together and say, both sides are ready, so please do. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's not over. So everybody's a little bit afraid for the time when the Chinese subsidy is going down, which is already doing so. So what happens? The spot business will disappear, definitely, but clients like the OEMs of the automotive industry or higher-level electronics will remain on the train. Why? Because the transit time will be as short as possible, mentioned before, 10 to 9 days, and this means the bounded capital, and when we're talking about a value per container of more than $100,000, the bounded capital is already more value than the transport price itself. And this is the goal what we have to achieve, and still I'm convinced that we could reach a level of 2 to 3 million TEU on these corridors. We will never beat the deep sea connection, because the deep sea connection with its capacity and its price is unbeatable, but what we can beat is the transit time. We're reducing from 5 to 6 days to 10 days, plus 1 additional day of delivery, and this is what we have to work for. So once again, it's summarized, the infrastructure, the service itself in China and on the wide gauge territory is more or less on these 1,500 kilometers per day. Where we have to achieve and we have to come closer is the European gate. And here are the challenges and the most improvement. So looking at this map, we see the most interesting border crossing and terminal points and hub points in Europe. As mentioned before, was Kaliningrad and Brest for sure as well. Then we have some hinterland wide gauge entries like Košice. We are very close to Bratislava, so this means that the European railway network has to come together, has to build alliances in order to prepare the service, the long-lasting service, and last but not least is our project, the wide gauge extension from the European entry border towards Vienna, and this makes Eastern Austria as one of the future hubs. Altogether, these measurements and looking at the time brings us for the challenge that we have to come closer and we have to intensify the communication between us. I think within the bilateral discussions today and the following weeks, we will work out some concrete topics and have to follow them because the time is running. Thank you very much.
Спасибо огромное. Следующий наш выступатель.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker ist Herr Fedor Pekhterev. He is an advisor to the first deputy of Russian Railways. He has for 22 years been working at the Institute of Traffic Development. And I would like to ask you the following question. I received a report by the Transport Ministry about the efficiency of Russian railways, and 10% of this network is strongly limited. It's in efficiency. How should you improve your working activities in order to eliminate this delay? Well, I will be very brief and forgo my PowerPoint presentation since we have very little time today. Well, first, you mentioned our lagging back in capacity utilization. Well, we're not lagging back so much because we're actually forerunners in Europe. We're amongst number one in Europe, or perhaps across the world, in capacity utilization. Now, as far as, well, transit, shortening transit times, well, is something we have to, of course, on the one hand, comply with the laws, the valid laws, and on the other hand, we have to comply with new technological requirements. This is not always easy in Russia because we are faced with bottlenecks. Now, what is a bottleneck? It can be doubly defined as a physical bottleneck, a lack of infrastructure on the one hand, and secondly, it might be defined as a system working without reserves at the level, we're really problems with standardization because we're really complying, we're very close to our limits in complying with standardization. There's one special thing about Russia. 80% of the freight traffic, and this includes international goods, transit goods, these 80% are transported on 30% of the railway network in Russia. And this, of course, enhances bottlenecks, because the worse the situation, the worse these bottlenecks will become, and therefore it's important to get together and talk about the problem, and something has happened last year. At the moment, we are close, I think, to solving this problem within a plannable period. And this is something that will hopefully be felt both in Russia and Europe. Restructuring of these bottlenecks, how can this be done? Well, first of all, through legal norms, through the facilitation of the handover documentation, and of course, we know that this is work for decades in order to find really a uniform legal space within which we can move. This will take some time, and therefore we'll have to find smaller solutions that make handover more easy. Then there are technological solutions. Just to give you an example, in order to avoid these bottlenecks and increase speed within the Russian railways, my company has introduced important technological changes. As a pilot project, we've introduced a system that works without signals. And our engineers, our leading engineers, believe This will increase the efficiency of our railways by double, actually. As I said, this is a pilot project that helps us to avoid investments. And then there are financial infrastructure tools that help us to avoid these bottlenecks. We've seen that if we continue to put stress on these bottlenecks, we won't be able to afford it, neither in Russia, nor in Asia, nor in Europe, and therefore we have to change the technology of high-speed trains, passenger trains. We have formulated a program for specializing railway traffic. That is, we want to ease the pressure on some routes and prepare these routes for high-speed traffic. And while at the same time, bulk freight, where speed is less important, are no longer to run along the routes that I've mentioned, the 30% routes that are mostly used. And this, in fact, enables us to increase our efficiency by 25% for the corridors north, south, and east, west, towards the south, towards the Crimea. And now we want to implement the roll of this model towards the west as well, and therefore the new Moscow traffic hub is very important for this purpose. This technological change also entails another approach. Everybody's mentioned that Brest is really under siege, so to speak. It's one of the worst bottlenecks. But if we move towards south, we will notice the same bottlenecks because the railway network is shaped the way it is. The Institute of Railway Economy and Western consultants have confirmed by way of studies that we should transport 1.5 million TEU, or could transport 1.5 million TEU in addition as well. We could do it. You have mentioned that sea transport is more expensive, is cheaper. But if we, as you said, if we are more expensive, but at the same time much faster, then we are really competitive vis-a-vis sea transport. And therefore, it is very important to persevere along this path. And this path, this approach has been adopted by the government. That is, these 9,500 kilometers that are considered tight spots will be reduced by 2025 to 4,000 kilometers. And I think this will significantly increase the quality of transports, especially regarding international transit.
This is very interesting what we keep hearing here. We have two more speakers ahead of us. So maybe you can present the result of our panel here. So USC, he's a graduate from the St. Joseph College in London. And he's a high-level expert on security. In Great Britain, he is responsible for safety in the Eurotunnel. He is responsible for railway safety in Europe, and he's a coordinator of USC. So he is an expert on standards, and he knows how important and good it is if everything is harmonized and working as it should. So the first question we want to ask is, what about the potential of the Silk Road? How is this all connected? Industry 4.0, harmonization, and your view as an expert in the area of rail safety. Thank you.
From our chairman of this session, but also from the chairman of the previous session. All I would say to you is that in this particular context, I'm wearing a slightly different hat because in the last discussion we had, I was focusing much more on my role as the coordinator of the European portfolio within the UIC, but now I've switched hats and I am now wearing my hat as the Chief Standardisation Officer at the UIC. So what do we know? What we do know is that railways are efficient and are a very environmentally friendly form of transport, or the form of transporting people and goods from A to B. But it's important that in so doing that the sector performs in an efficient, safe and cost-effective manner. And having a user-friendly suite of standardised requirements is a really good way of providing consistent service to the customer. Using such a consistent business-focused approach can offer a set of powerful business and marketing tools for railway undertakings and infrastructure managers alike, regardless of the size of the company. Oh yeah, is it feedback? Yeah. I'll have it afterwards. Sorry, we don't want any more squeaky speakers. Whether regardless of the size of the company, and of course regardless of the geographical location of the organisation. And with railways being an inherently systemic network, the stakeholders need to be able to work in seamless harmony with neighbours in different countries, as well, especially in the European context, with operating neighbours in the same country. Oh, that's the wrong slides. Never mind. You turn those off because I'm not going to use those. That was in the last. That was for the last one. So you'll just have to visualise this now as I talk to you. So having a rail-specific framework in place supports the definition of interfaces between neighbouring stakeholders so that trains are able to cross between state borders and change systems with the minimum of fuss and with maximum efficiency. And that, of course, that includes gauge changing as well. The UIC has been in the business of supporting the railway sector in achieving these objectives ever since its first UIC leaflet was published in 1928. Topics such as the establishment of the UIC track gauge, the 1435mm gauge, the conditions for people to work safely on the railway, and operational requirements of rolling stock have all featured in documents produced by the UIC and continue to do so. Having a standardised regime in place helps companies to fine-tune their performance, and especially important in the railway sector, to manage operating risks whilst at the same time operating in more efficient and sustainable ways. Railway companies today simply cannot afford to take an improvised reactive approach to risk. A consistent system-wide regime is proven as a significant support in identifying and minimising risks. Such a regime is an excellent marketing support as it allows companies to demonstrate the quality of the service that they provide to the end user. And we heard one speaker earlier talking about lean management. And perhaps equally as important, they permit all of that good practice to firmly underpin the way we work as individual companies and as a transport mode. The end user is becoming ever more demanding in the quality of the services they purchase. Measuring the success of how that is achieved can be done by comparing performance of the service with the standardized processes in place at every level of a company and of the system. This, when, of course, all coupled together, greatly supports a visible and continuous promotion of cultural and service-driven improvement. In a global multimodal arena of rapidly emerging new technologies and operating challenges, learning from others' experiences and putting standardized solutions in place will help set the framework for the future. This in turn will support the purchasing of new products, finding and using new sources of energy, opening up new opportunities for new routes of transportation as well, such as, of course, the Silk Road, and generally innovating the system into a really successful, world-leading mode of transport. We can therefore deduce that there is much that can be gained for the railway operator by having a standardised framework in place. There are many players in railway standardisation, and the UIC does its best to liaise with all of them in order to ensure synergies wherever possible and to avoid irrelevant duplication of effort. One of the key areas in all of that is the working relationship we have, for example, with the OSGD, where we are bringing together some of the documentation that we already have published, and integrating some of the specific 1520 requirements into those documents. Now, the railways, with their need for a consistent approach to evolution of the system and getting the end user to where they want to be, but what about the manufacturers and the suppliers? A product manufactured according to well-developed and respected standards is far more easily accepted in international markets, and certainly accepted by the very companies that are going to use the products on a daily basis. So therefore we can deduce that using standards removes barriers to trade. The standardization landscape has changed over the past 20 years or so, and there is a continuous need to ensure that change matches user needs. Designing, constructing, operating and maintaining the railway system in accordance with a business-focused, standardized framework encourages and develops innovation. First, because it provides structured methods and reliable data that can save time in the innovation process, and second, because it makes it easier to disseminate groundbreaking ideas and knowledge about leading-edge techniques. UIC has recently refocused its activity in this entire domain and has established a new unit that I have the honour to lead that is focusing on developing a standardised framework that is fit for the 21st century. Migrating the former UIC leaflets into IRSs, or International Railway Solutions, this will emerge as a structured framework of standardised documents prepared and produced by the UIC for use within the railway sector. Working closely, of course, with a number of key stakeholders and institutions, but not least amongst which the end users, these new generation documents will blend together a range of voluntary solutions to support the design, construction, operation and maintenance of the railway system and, of course, the services that the sector provides. IRSs are designed for use by a wide range of railway stakeholders and are specifically designed to be multi-regional, multi-system and multifaceted. We are, of course, always ready to work with former, current and new partners in this work. The principal role of the UIC to develop transportation is to develop transportation by rail as the land transport mode of choice, and the IRSs are a component of that objective. Exciting evolutionary topics that will find themselves the subject of future IRSs will be FRMCS, which we talked about yesterday, the new approach to railway communication and ultimately signalling, the concept of blockchain technology and how that will impact on the railway, things like the safe use of drones and how we can safely evolve traction systems by using hydrogen technology. And that's not about let's design hydrogen technology, we know it exists, but this is about how is it made, how is it stored and how is it transported and how is it used in the railway system. Of course, we can only scratch the surface, thank you very much. Of course, we can only scratch the surface of these topics. But if you would like to know more, please contact us. And the last slide would have been my email address, which you can bombard me with questions if you wish to. But unfortunately, we can't show that. So you'll have to ask me for my business card instead. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you so much. У нас есть еще один выступающий. Это Juan Amoros, президент FERRME.
So this was Juan Amoros, the president, and now the doctor of the engineering sciences. He's also a member of many gremiums and umbrella organizations, and used to work for Nissan Motors, as well as other important organizations in important capacities. It is very good to have you here. We've also spoken about the problems of good flows within the European Union, maintenance, etc., with respect to the speed and the length of trains. And in this connection, I would like to pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to participate in this very important meeting. Thanks again for the impressive gala dinner of yesterday. Thank you. And I will try to explain. Our position is more from shippers' point of view, and basically in Europe. You see, the point is that the real facts is that there is no increase in the railway freight share in land transportation in the last 15 years. This is the reality in the European Union. Of course, the volume has grown because the business is growing, but the percentage is the same. The same. On the other hand, finally, we have been climbing for a core network. Finally, we achieve a core network, but there's a core network that is impossible to arrange. 80,000 kilometers. Who will arrange 80,000 kilometers in the European Union? It's impossible. Then our point of view is that in order to achieve the white paper targets by 2030, we have to concentrate the efforts in the most crowded corridors. This is our point of view, frankly speaking, in order to avoid the huge productivity that we forecast in the road transportation in the coming years. Then, if we don't do something in the most crowded corridors, it's impossible to arrange the situation. And regarding the Eurasian transportation, perhaps one key point is that at least in 2017, in value, we are only transporting by rail about a little bit more than 1% of the traffic. This is the reality. And perhaps another key point is the imbalance flows westbound, eastbound. This is another point that we have to do something jointly with arranging the transporting difficulties, etc., that other speaker has been talking about this and they will not do. In fact, FERRME has launched 20 requirements that we would like to have in the European Union rail network in the most important corridors. At least to have two parallel lines, one for backup could be used. And also another important point is the length of the trains, the loading gauge, the efficiency of the terminals, etc. This is, and of course, the free competition that is a pending point still in the European Union. We have made a study some years ago that demonstrates in the north-south vector in the European Union that if we install such kind of recommendations, we can have an internal rate of return of close to 11%, and it's quite significant to have longer and heavy trains everywhere. The core network, as I said, this is not the full core network. These are 9 corridors inside the full core network, but it's about 20,000 kilometers. Then what we propose is, and we are working on this, is to select 3 main corridors, let's say it east-west and north-south. and to concentrate the efforts here in the first phase, and later on, this is about 6,000 kilometers, and later on to add 9,000-10,000 kilometers additional in order to promote other east-west corridors in most Central and Southern Europe. The kind of trains that we like to have, it's in the future, of course, the first step will be to reach 740 meters in the European Union, because many countries don't have this possibility. In fact, the trains arriving from China to the European Union have a length of 600 meters. It's incredible. United States, in Canada, the length of the trains is 3 kilometers. Then what we would like to have in the future, by 2030, only in some important corridors, is to reach 1.5 kilometers. And for this, we need heavy trains, till 5,000 tons if necessary, and then we need 7,000 kilowatts or 10,000 kilowatts of power. But at that moment we have locomotives of 700 kilowatts in the European Union. Then little by little we can reach it. This is an example of long trains, a test made by Marathon Project in the European Union. This is 1.5 kilometers. And this train, it's about 4,000 tons. And it runs successfully between Sibelen and Nimes in France. This is one Russian train in the Trans-Siberian line that, as you can see, is a train of more than 1 kilometer. Such kind of trains, when arrive to Belarus, have to be split in 2 and 3 to continue to the European Union. This is the problem. Another key point is to move the tracks from the road to the rail. This is another point which we will push very strongly. And what we like is no more tracks in distances over 1,000 kilometers in the European Union. Then all the trailers have to be put in the train in the same way that you put the trailers in the vessel in the Baltic or in the Mediterranean Sea, etc. Then we have to do something like that if we really would like to achieve the environmental challenges. Another point is that we need long trains, but compact trains as well, because in fact most of the traffic between China and Europe, it's about 40% of this traffic is high added value products. Then are not so heavy products. Then if we have long wagons of 25 meters, we can carry 4 TEUs per wagon, and then we'll have more compact trains and, of course, more efficient trains. Another point that is important is that with big ships that we have, the train could be one challenge. It could be an opportunity to have some kind of pipeline deliveries between China and Europe. If we finally reach 7-10 days between China and European Union, practically we can compete with the plane. This is very clear. And then at that moment, as far as I know, 95% of the transporting value between China and European Union is by vessel, 4% by plane and 1% by train, more or less. Then we can take part of this 4% to the railway. Of course, to do this, we need to identify suitable corridors. And another very important point is to identify in China, Russian Federation, European Union, strategic terminals, because we need strategic terminals able for long trains, not now, but in the future, and also to make what the French people say ferrotage, that is to put the trailers in the trains. We have launched, in order to achieve this, we follow completely the UIC ideas of standardization, of course, and CER presentation. We fully agree on this, and we will concentrate basically in all that is concerning the bottleneck solving regarding the length of the trains and the loading gauge and the efficiency of the terminals. And in the case of Eurasian level, jointly with CCTT, we will get in touch with CCCT. We have very good relationship with them in order to shorten the lead time inside the European Union. Well, particularly then we will proceed with the efficiency of the intermodal terminals, as I said, the length of the trains, loading gauge, rolling stock improvements, I have to also talk about this, resolution of main bottlenecks in order to facilitate the transit. That is, the possibility of the traffic is enormous. The problem is that the train is not efficient. This is the problem. And at least in the European Union, then we have to work carefully and to identify at the Eurasian level the key terminals, strategic terminals, dual linked with long trains among them, and then with shorter trains to intermediate terminals and local terminals to make the door-to-door distribution. This is very simple, but what we like to have in Europe, basically. And according to the study that you have made, we can reduce the transportation cost by rail over 25%. We can have trains with more than 200 TEUs per train. We can increase with longer trains the capacity of the lines over 50%, etc., etc. And such kind of wagons that we have analyzed jointly with the Technical University of Berlin, we can also save 2 tons per wagon. Then this is what we would like, and finally, as I said, we will reach one internal rate of return of 11%. That is very important. Then we have launched 1 year ago, jointly with Chinese authorities, what we call Eurasian Connectivity and Industrial Cooperation Forum. We have started in Chengzhou last year. This year we will have this conference in Europe. Sorry. This will be held in the 6th of November in Brussels. You are kindly invited to participate. And basically, what we would like is to improve the efficiency of the Eurasian trade and manufacturing processes through a high-performance pipeline, because, in fact, with the train we have made some kind of pipeline deliveries. That is very important. And to push ahead a fully synchronized manufacturing system between China and Europe, with just-in-time delivering a minimal transit time, and to impel the circular economy at Eurasian level, and to display the FERRME multi-sectoral working groups all over the European Union, and with close contact with UIC, CR, and CCCT, and OECD, etc., etc. Well, basically, this is what my message, and frankly speaking, I think that in European Union, we have to push the member states, because unfortunately, the European Commission has no power against the member states. Then we are an independent association. We have about 130 members all over the European Union, and even we have some members in Russia and China. And our idea is to push member state by member state in order to improve the situation of the rail freight transportation, with not so huge expenses, but in order to make the existing network to be efficient as required by the shippers. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Большое спасибо. Александр Сергеевич.
Thank you very much. Well, Alexander, you are seated at the center, probably not by chance. The Russian railways today have taken the floor several times, and also yesterday's reception was hosted by them, and certainly has underlined the role of the Russian railways in the current developments. You're right at the midst of them. And now, what is your evaluation of the situation? You know, the motto is we overcome borders, both physical and in the minds of people. So how do you view the results? Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to thank the participants in this session, also the participants in the plenary, because it's a joint event, of course, we're participating in. I think we are gradually forming a common opinion. I think this is kind of a red thread because we do dispose of technologies that enable us to compete with other means of transport and to prevail in this competition. Our possibilities are actually very great, but we're, of course, at the beginning of the path. The perspective is gigantic. We can step up to millions and millions of containers, TEUs, as we've heard. And it's not just long-term, but it's medium-term planning that might make it possible. Secondly, we've discussed the integrated approaches and working methods on the Eurasian continent because there are 600,000 kilometers of trucks on these two continents. So the integration of railway systems of gauges shows us that we have enormous potential to increase effectiveness. For that, we need a common language, common standards and norms, and these are questions that we must not shy away from. I see with great satisfaction that this is already concretizing in a very precise proposal. Thirdly, we are more and more realizing that digitalization actually is the future. That 1520 gauge width can be viewed as an indicator for optimization potentials. That this might be a step towards an entirely new perspective, a perception of railways and the railway system. Of course, we've also heard today that intermodal transport should not be neglected because it harbors a lot of possibilities for the future, transshipment at ports to railways, paperless system, more effective transshipment. There are so many ways that help us to increase our competitiveness and make transit run smoother. Human resources, too. Well, it's been mentioned that we've to give thought also to the expectations of our end customers and consumers, and bring this in line with our work from the viewpoint, from the viewpoint of our customers. Not necessarily the end consumer, obviously our customers. This is a learning process. To ensure comfortable and timely delivery and service performance. I mean, these are buzzwords that we hear more and more, and I think that should become more and more part of our thinking, of our work and of our thinking first. So I would like to thank you very much for your participation in this session, and I would also like to thank our colleague from ÖBB, and after all, the ÖBB is, of course, also co-organizer of this event. I would like to wish you a lot of success for the future. I think the future is bright.